The most dangerous woman is the one who doesn't need a group chat. They don't talk about her at brunch. She's the one who suddenly stopped replying in the family group thread, the one who skipped the cousin's third baby shower, the one who, rumor has it, is going through something, just because she stopped showing up and started glowing. But let me tell you the truth, if you are a woman with no friends, you are not pitiful, you are terrifying. You are walking proof that silence can be seductive, that solitude can be strength, that you don't need a full calendar to feel full inside, and that scares people. Because a woman who doesn't chase invitations, who doesn't need to be tagged, liked, validated, or tolerated, she's radioactive, spiritually contagious, a threat to every codependent relationship within a 20-mile radius. They think you've lost it. You haven't. You've finally found the part of yourself that doesn't shrink to stay digestible. You're not broken. You're unbothered. You didn't lose your spark. You stopped setting yourself on fire just to keep lukewarm people comfortable. So if you're alone right now, good. You're right on time. Because what you're building in this silence, this invisible, misunderstood, beautifully awkward chapter, isn't a breakdown. It's the beginning of your uprising. And one day when you walk back into that room, they'll feel it. They won't say it, but they'll feel it. You didn't disappear, you evolved. Part 1. The empty room is a temple, not a tomb. At first, the empty room feels like death, not dramatic, tragic movie death. More like social death, the kind where your phone battery is at 94%, but your notifications are at 0. You check your messages and get hit with that familiar ghost town vibe. No texts, no pings, just the soft echo of your own loneliness bouncing off the walls like a passive-aggressive roommate. But here's the plot twist they don't tell you at women's retreats. That empty room, it's not a tomb, it's a temple. And the silence you're drowning in, that's not abandonment. That's the sound of the divine finally getting a word in. Edgewise, Buddhists call this moment noble solitude. The space where you stop performing, stop entertaining, and stop trying to be the kind of woman who collects approval like it's a retirement plan. Suddenly there's no audience, just you, and maybe a dust bunny or two, both of whom seem way more peaceful than your last friend. But it's in this sacred stillness that something sacred starts to happen. You start hearing things, not voices, just truth. The voice you buried under to-do lists, family obligations, fake laughter, and lukewarm coffee with people who drained you. And slowly, the room changes shape. What once felt like punishment now feels like possibility. You stop pacing and start sitting. You stop checking your phone and start checking your soul. You stop hoping someone shows up and realize maybe for the first time you finally did. So no, the empty room isn't a death sentence. It's a womb. You're not disappearing. You're gestating. And trust me, what's about to be born will scare the hell out of everyone who thought you needed them to survive. Part 2. Loneliness is a detox. You're just withdrawing from people who drained you. You're not lonely, you're detoxing. You think it's heartbreak, but what you're actually feeling is withdrawal from years of over-giving, over-smiling, and over-accommodating people who couldn't spell reciprocity if it bit them in the soul. You know the type. They love the old you, the one who said yes when she meant no, the one who kept the peace by swallowing her truth, the one who picked up every emotional tab while others treated your spirit like an open bar. And now that you've stopped, now they're quiet. Suddenly, you're acting different. Suddenly, you're distant. No sweetheart, you're just sober for the first time in years, and the silence is what sanity sounds like. Elderly psychology calls it emotional depletion. Buddhism calls it tanha, the thirst that never ends. These people weren't nourishing you. They were using you as a watering hole and leaving you cracked and dry. So yes, the loneliness feels intense, like all your muscles forgot how to be alone. But that's what detox does. It rips the poison out through the pores of your identity. You'll feel shaky. Question everything? Miss people who were never really there. That's normal, but give it time. Because the further you get from those shallow connections, the clearer you'll see just how many of them were quietly eroding you. They didn't abandon you. You upgraded yourself out of their energetic pay grade. And once your nervous system stabilizes, once your soul stops mistaking noise for connection, you'll begin to feel something wild, something dangerous, peace. That rich, rare, untouchable kind of peace that makes people uncomfortable. Because it means you don't need their presence to feel whole anymore. You're not sad, you're healing. You're not being punished, you're being purified. And the ones who once fed on your light, they'll starve without you, and you won't even flinch. Part 3. No applause. Perfect. That's when you find out what you're made of. There comes a moment, usually around the 3rd day of silence, when you look around and realize no one is watching. No one's texting to check in. No one's clapping for your growth. No one is writing, "You got this," under your latest life update. Because, well, you haven't posted one. You've gone quiet. You've vanished from the circus. And guess what? That's when the real show begins. See, most people only know how to grow with an audience. They post their breakthroughs. They share their gratitude lists. They heal strategically, so it's still likable. But you're not healing for show. You're healing in the dark, where it's real. That's spiritual weight training. That's the monk lifting emotional dumbbells, while everyone else is still flexing for likes. Buddhism calls it viraya, effort without craving. You're doing the work, not because someone's watching, but because it's time. You're pulling weeds in the garden of your soul, knowing full well no one's bringing a trophy. And it's in this quiet place where you don't get cookies for being strong or followers for being deep that you meet a version of yourself you forgot existed. She doesn't need applause. She's her own standing ovation. She doesn't need a crowd. She is the moment and the beauty of it all. When the crowd eventually does come back, because they always come back when they sense power, you won't need them to stay. You'll already know your worth. Clap or don't watch or not. You're not here to perform. You're here to become. And baby, that stage, it was always yours. You just had to clear the room. First, part 4. You're not behind. You're just on a different path with better scenery. There's a special kind of anxiety that hits when you realize everyone you know seems to be somewhere else, doing more, having more, becoming more. Your old friend just launched a business. Your cousin just posted her 4th grandchild. Your ex, meditating in Bali with someone named Sky, who probably makes gluten-free moon bread, and you're staring at a plant you forgot to water. Again, but hear this clearly. You're not behind. You're just on a different trail, and yours has better views. Buddhism teaches that comparison is a form of ignorance, not stupidity, but blindness. You can't compare two paths when they're going different directions. And you especially can't compare timelines when one is measured by the soul and the other still obsessing over LinkedIn. Elderly psychology backs this up as people age. Well-being shifts from status and success to meaning and peace. Translation: the race everyone's running. You're not even registered. You're hiking at your own pace through the woods with snacks. And yes, sometimes the silence on your path feels like failure, like you've somehow missed the milestones. But what if your milestones are just spaced further apart because they're made of something heavier? Wisdom, clarity, self-respect. What if you're not late? You're just deep. Besides, the loudest lives often crash the hardest, the ones sprinting ahead. Many are running from themselves, not toward anything. So don't envy the finish line. Enjoy your weird, wonderful, winding road. Because while they're out there chasing likes, promotions, and overpriced retreats, you're building something quieter, but far more unshakable. Let them run. You've got a sunrise to watch and a life to savor. And darling, your view is spectacular. Part 5. The curse of being. Deep in a shallow world. There's a quiet curse no one warns you about, becoming deep in a world that values splash. You start asking real questions about impermanence, meaning why everyone you know is suddenly obsessed with matching patio furniture, and people look at you like you've just suggested replacing wine night with a funeral chant. It's not that you're difficult, you're just operating on a different bandwidth. Buddhism teaches that wisdom, prajna, alienates before it liberates. When you begin to see through illusion, the party loses its sparkle. The small talk feels like static. The constant validation hunting looks. Exhausting elderly psychology calls this spiritual divergence. It happens when you finally outgrow the survival games of your younger self. You stop caring about popularity. You start craving depth, and suddenly you're the only one at the dinner table who doesn't find gossip appetizing anymore. And that's when the loneliness sharpens. You'll be told you're too much, too serious, or everyone's favorite, intimidating. Translation: you stopped performing. You asked questions that required silence. You remembered that you're not here to entertain, you're here to wake up. Dark humor moment. You try explaining non-attachment at your niece's bridal shower, and now you're banned from family events. All you said was, marriage is impermanent. They acted like you suggested polygamy. But here's the gift in this curse. The deeper you go, the fewer people can follow, but the more magnetic your presence becomes. You stop trying to fit in. You start making space. Not everyone will get you. Good. You weren't born to be understood by the shallow. You were born to disturb the waters until the truth floats to the surface. Let them swim away. You're diving. Part 6. When you're unavailable. You become dangerous. There's a strange shift that happens when you stop being available. Not in a petty, I'm too good for you kind of way. No, you just stop answering, stop performing. Stop showing up to places where your spirit has to shrink just to fit in. And the response: people panic. Because here's the uncomfortable truth: most folks aren't drawn to you. They're drawn to your usefulness, your accessibility, your willingness to say yes, even when your soul is screaming, please, dear God, no. But the second that door locks, from the inside they call you cold, distant, complicated. No, darling, you're just finally quiet enough to hear your own breath again. Buddhism calls this non-attachment, not because you hate people, but because you're no longer willing to contort yourself for ones who only liked you. Exhausted, elderly psychology. It calls this the liberation phase. When women often post-60 realize they no longer have to play nice to keep the peace, especially when the peace was never theirs to begin with. And the world doesn't like that, because a woman who is no longer available for nonsense is terrifying. She disrupts systems. She stops being the emotional sponge. She cancels her martyr subscription and starts booking appointments with joy, humor. You used to text back in 12 seconds. Now you light incense, meditate water. Your plants take a nap and maybe reply in 3 business days, and somehow the world didn't collapse. When you become unavailable, you become unpredictable. When you stop chasing, you become magnetic. And when you stop needing, then you become dangerous, not to yourself, but to every structure that depended on your self-neglect to function. Part 7. Stop chasing invitations. You are the ceremony. Let's be honest. There's a moment in every woman's life, usually somewhere between the last group brunch and the first silent Sunday, when she realizes she's not getting invited anymore. No texts, no birthday dinners, not even a passive-aggressive Facebook tag. Just you, and a reminder that apparently the group chat has gone private. And it stings at first, until it doesn't. Because eventually, if you're brave or tired enough, you stop chasing invitations altogether. Why? Because you remember you are the damn ceremony. You're not missing out on the celebration. You are the celebration. You are the confetti, the wine, the incense, the altar. You are the guest of honor, the speech, the sacred silence afterward. Buddhism would call this sampajanya, clear awareness. The moment you stop outsourcing your joy to other people's plans and start honoring yourself, like the walking temple you are. Elderly psychology calls it identity individuation. It's the phase where women stop defining themselves through roles, mother, friend, host, and start showing up just as themselves. No RSVP required. And the funny part, once you stop chasing invitations, the people who once ignored you, they start watching. You become radiant in your refusal to beg. You become holy in your solitude. They'll whisper, "She's changed." You didn't change. You just finally left the party where the music was too loud and the conversation too fake, and through your own. And yes, it was a solo tea party with Miles Davis playing in the background and cake you didn't have to share. And it was divine. Part 8. The greatest power is when you can love without needing anyone to stay. Most people love like gamblers, desperate clutching, hoping the other person doesn't leave because if they do, the whole house of cards might collapse, and spoiler alert, it always does. But the real ones, the wise ones, they love like monks, open hand, soft heart, zero hostage situations. Because the greatest power isn't in holding on, it's in loving fully, without needing anyone to stay. You don't hear that in most Hallmark movies. But Buddhism has been shouting it from the mountaintop for centuries. All things are impermanent. People. Emotions. Tuesday night promises even your favorite mug, especially your favorite mug. Elderly psychology backs it up. The healthiest women in old age are the ones who form deep bonds but remain psychologically whole with or without them. They don't panic when people drift. They don't unravel when the phone goes quiet. They don't mistake silence for failure. We are, because they've already built a home inside themselves. And it's rent-free, drama-free, and doesn't require constant emotional check-ins to feel valid humor moment. You once cried for 3 days when someone ghosted you. Now you light a candle, bless them, and delete the thread like a high priestess of emotional decluttering. This isn't apathy, it's liberation. You can love someone and still let them go. You can be generous without becoming a doormat, compassionate without being a convenience store, loyal without being leashed. You can love deeply and stay whole. And once you know that, you're not just strong, you're untouchable. Let's be clear, you weren't left behind, you were pulled aside. While they ran toward noise, applause, and another round of soul-numbing catch-ups, you were handed something rarer, a mirror, a silence, a brush, a chance to rebuild from bone instead of Band-Aids. You weren't being punished, you were being initiated into depth, into sovereignty, into the kind of power that doesn't tremble when people leave because it was never built on their presence. The woman who can sit in silence and laugh, who doesn't chase, doesn't explain, doesn't contort herself for approval. She's not cold, she's not broken, she's free. And the best part, that freedom is contagious. It spreads not with noise, but with presence. Quiet, steady, undistracted presence. You walk into a room and people feel it. Not because you're loud, but because you don't need to be. That's the gift of all this. The loneliness, the detox, the missed invitations, the birthday parties for one. It was all prep work so you could stop surviving in fragments and start living in wholeness. So take your tea, sit in your chair, let the quiet settle. You're not waiting for anyone. You're not lacking anything. You are the temple. And you've just begun to ring your own bell.